I am not a critic. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar. I'm not an intellectual. I'm not a movie buff. I'm also not a troll. I'm not a character. I'm not a contrarian. I'm not the devil's advocate. I'm King Cool, and I can't be the only person who hated the new Star Trek. So, Star Trek got this glossy new and improved, and you know, I hate this. I hate doing this. You know what, I got computers, so I can just put giant red quotes, like, surrounding me anytime I'm sarcastic. We'll see how many times I have to do that. So we got this new and improved reboot in 2009, and it was quite commercially and critically successful. It has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. Do you know what movie has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes? So everyone loved the new Star Trek, except me. But the question now is, why? And before we get started, we're not talking about the one that's about to come out, like literally when this goes up, it'll probably be like 2 days from now. And we're not talking about the fact that he's going to do the new Star Wars, because, like, I don't think that we should have had an episode 7 even if it was George Lucas himself doing it. Which people will say, oh, George Lucas, he's just going to screw it up. But people, I've actually heard them say, it couldn't get worse than George Lucas. It's like, you guys have a tiny imagination if you don't think that. We're also not talking about how apparently J.J. Abrams is going to do the Portal movie, because I don't think there should be a Portal movie at all, but that's just me. We're also not talking about how it's not, I don't like it because it's not like the original series. Hang on, let me check Tetsuko Special Internet here and see how many episodes of the original series I've seen. Plus 2. Yeah, none. I've never seen an episode of the original. I don't really care about that. The only Star Trek series I've seen any great amount of is Voyager, and everyone says Voyager's terrible, and I kind of like it, but that's the whole point of this show, is, you know, the fact that maybe my taste is totally questionable. But now someone's going to go out and say, well, if you didn't see the first one, this isn't really for you, and you can't expect to like it, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great, then we can completely discount the people I've heard who've all said, well, this wasn't, I didn't know anything about Star Trek, but I saw this one, and I liked it. I think it was a good introduction to the series. I don't know if this is a good introduction to the series. I'm not a Star Trek expert. I know it somewhat, you know, look, I mean, clearly, you know. But my objections don't come from the fact that it's not like the original series. I don't really care about that. My objections come to the fact that it is painfully generic. And I could deal with that if it wasn't for the fact that the action sucks and the story is boring. Let's start with the action. I'll admit, I can be picky about action. My favorite movie of all time is The Matrix, which gave us huge, long, gorgeous shots of kung fu and all that good stuff. But I've been entertained by lesser action. You know what I just watched? The Total Recall remake from 2012. And it's pretty derivative. It's basically The Bourne Runner, if you get my drift. And it doesn't really have anything to say that a bunch of movies haven't said before it about war and love and memory and identity. They took a wonderfully weird movie and they made it pretty generic and PG-13. They still do the three-boobed girl, but it's weird because there aren't any mutants in this movie. Wasn't too much to ask that after she leaves, she just turns around and she's got 3 butts. But at the end of the day, the action in the new Total Recall was quite good, and sometimes that's really all you need. I'm never going to watch it again, but I watched it once. Where does this film falter with the action? Well, let's start with the very first scene, where Kirk meets Uhura at the bar. But wait! I hear you say, that's not the first scene of the movie! Let's just say it's the first scene of the movie. Let's give this movie every chance we can. So Kirk gets in a fight with some cadets because he said something stupid. I will say I do actually sort of like the lines, you can't count this high, but there are 4 of us. We'll get a few more guys and it'll be even. And then the bald guy throws a punch at Kirk. I think it says Kirk touched his face. Ugh. After watching the first fight scene, I defy anyone to tell me, while watching it at regular speed, which guy is hitting him at what point. Maybe the background is too dark, maybe it's because they're all dressed the same, but I immediately could not tell what was happening. A good fight scene allows you to follow where someone is throughout the entire scene. It's not that shaking the camera around can't be effective, but not here. Here's a challenge. If you got the disc, watch the scene and tell me what the first move Kirk does to the bald guy is, without rewinding. I didn't figure it out until like the 4th time I watched it. And at the time code's 2203, Kirk is supposed to duck his head out of the way of the guy, and he hits his friend by mistake. But it's so fast, I didn't know what was going on. I think it's the only punch in the entire fight that isn't a wild haymaker or a weird kick. Have you guys seen License to Kill? There's a bar fight scene in that movie too, but the camera is almost always stationary. You see Bond line someone up, punch them, they fall away, they fall on the table, just like Kirk does in this movie. My point is, this is shot in a way that gives you context for what's happening. I wouldn't call it dynamic, but it's clear. I don't say this lightly, but the fight scene at the opening of White Chicks is better than this fight scene. And that's a comedy. Now, don't get me wrong, White Chicks is still worse than this movie. Let's not lose all sense. It's still worse. Some people are going to be like, oh, that, you know, if you just done all that fancy choreography, that's boring. That's not what a real fight's like. It's like, well, yeah, no, it's not. But a real fight isn't just, boom, stand back up, boom. It's not a bunch of haymakers either. A real fight isn't interesting cinematically. And quite frankly, neither is this. You know what real fights look like? Remember Epic Beard Guy? Go look him back up. You probably totally forgot about him. But that's what a real fight can look like sometimes. And they take like 4 seconds. Jumping way forward, Sulu gets in a sword fight. Sulu says he's a fencer, but he pulls it a katana. Fine, nitpick, but whatever. If I'm picky about action, then I'm really picky about sword fights. And this one is absolutely pitiful. Aside from the fact that the random acrobatic moves are only done when he's being shot from really far away because it's an acrobatic double. They also do this in Scott Pilgrim, but the action in Scott Pilgrim is way better. They just never stay in sword fight range. They do like one move and then immediately advance into do a punch. One time they do 2 sword moves before one of them moves in for a weird little kick. But not only that, they just never let it build. There'll be a clip where they start swinging the sword, cut to the swords once they meet, and then they are moved apart. Cut again to them being swung again, cut again to when they're back together. There's 4 cuts for 2 moves. That's too much. Or the biggest sin of all. Watch the very first move when the swords make contact. The guy holds his sword out and Sulu brings his up to meet it after he has stopped moving his sword. He was anticipating the block, or at least that's what it looked like to me. Not to go back to the James Bond comparisons, but Die Another Day, possibly the worst James Bond movie of all, although Quantum of Solace really does give it a run for its money, has a much better sword fight. It's not good, but damn it, we see takes with 4 or 5 full swings in it. We have constant context as to where they are and how they're moving in relation to their environment and one another. And they leave the dang camera alone and don't shake it around. If quick editing like this, if that gets you excited, then you must be really thrilled whenever they cut to commercial break. But you know what? Have it. You know, have fun. Okay? But the fight choreographer in this movie, in my opinion, should either be frustrated that it was either shot so badly or the actors couldn't live up to it, or he should be deeply ashamed that he put something out this poor. And that's not to say that's the only action this movie has. You know, they got the space battles, you know. The Enterprise lacks the finesse that, like, X-Wing or something smaller would have, so I wouldn't really call them dog fights. They're more like, you know, manatee fights, where it's like, you know. But that's, you know, Enterprise is a big ship, so that doesn't bother me. These scenes are fine, you know, at the end of the day, they're fine. But how are they different from the fight scenes in space in Star Trek the movies, or Star Trek the TV show, or Star Wars, or pretty much any space opera? I bet the ones in Wing Commander are probably okay too. I've never actually seen Wing Commander. But what's the difference? I mean, this is supposed to be new and improved, and this one seems to be sort of the same. The only thing that they do different, as far as I can tell, is they take lights and they shine them at your face all the time. You might have noticed I didn't just shine a light in your face right there. That's because I like you guys, and I don't wish for you guys to suffer with headaches. I don't know where the whole trend of, like, look at all these blobs and streaks and all this other stuff, I don't know where that started, but I would love it to go away. Even, like, Total Recall, it did it a lot. It didn't do it every single scene. Like, if they're in, like, a dark subway tunnel that's been abandoned, there's no lights, there's not really any lens flare there. It's not necessary. In this one, it's everywhere. It's almost every scene. When I first rewatched this movie, I was like, I got the disc, I gotta watch it, and I had a mild headache. Don't do that. If you have light sensitivity, like I do when I get a headache, don't do it. It's just not a good idea. You'll just be like every time they flash, it's like, you're making me hurt. Forgive me for looking at the script. I have to quote this directly. In an interview on IO9 that was quoted on IMDb.com, J.J. Abrams says, and I quote, "There's something about these flares, especially in a movie that potentially could be incredibly sterile and overly controlled by CGI, that's just incredibly unpredictable and gorgeous." Oh, what have we here? This is an invitation for J.J. Abrams and his director of photography to kiss my ass. Is it really unpredictable when it's in every scene? Oh, it was so unpredictable when, you know, Daniel Bernhardt kicked that guy. It was so unpredictable when Pauly Shore whined and lost his hair. How else is this movie different from the original Star Trek? Well, there's lots of aliens in this movie, not just the Vulcans and that one green Orion girl. There's this guy, this guy, this guy, this woman with freaky-looking CGI eyeballs that made her look like Avatar, and the little goblin guy played by Deep Roy. Who are they? What are their names? What species are they? No idea. They're just there to add flavor to the background of scenes. I think only 2 of them even have lines. In fact, there's something sort of mean about that first scene in the bar before. The guy, I hesitate to say the guy with a long face, it seems sort of offensive. But he sits between Uhura and Kirk, and they just talk around him. They talk past him. They talk through him. It's kind of mean. Say what you will about the cornucopia of foreheads in Star Trek, but at least every important race had something about it that mattered. Is it silly that you can name the motivation of an entire race of aliens with one word? War, logic, mercilessness, profit, assimilation, the hunt, the hierarchy, gang warfare. That's 2 words, but if it's going to describe the Kazon in 1 word, it would be sucking. And this isn't all the time, by the way. Try using 1 word to describe Bajorans or Talaxians. Other than that. Some Trekkie could correct me here, but I don't think they ever brought a character in just because they looked a certain way. It always had some sort of reason or logic. These aliens are more like the aliens in the cantina scene in Star Wars, where the design just dictates everything. And by the way, that first one you saw kind of looks like the first alien we see in the very first shot of the cantina in Star Wars. It didn't strike me until the 4th time I watched this that the bad guy has a giant shuttle that can destroy planets. Or that they destroy this shuttle by flying a little ship inside of that ship. Do you guys remember when C-3PO says, what exactly does he say? The odds of successfully navigating a asteroid field is 3,720 to 1. Well, Spock at one point says, the odds of us surviving are less than 4.3%. 0.3. 0.3! You know what 0.3 is? This is J.J. Abrams' butt, and that's a turd. I'm not sure why it's up that high. I don't know. You might want to talk to a doctor about that. Have I talked about the villain yet? I just realized I haven't. Okay, we're now going to be getting into actual spoilers for this. So, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it, you know, if you're interested. Every movie deserves to be seen in sequence by itself and not, you know, be chopped up and whatever. Every movie deserves to be seen. There's only one type of movie that doesn't, and if I actually turn this into a series, eventually I might get into that, but for now I'm not going to say. So if you actually haven't and you are interested, stop now, just because I'm now going to be talking about plot details, and you can't unhear them, so, and not even that there is a spoiler, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. You won't know until you see it. So, go. So, there's an attack on Vulcan, and they send the Enterprise mostly with cadets on board, and Kirk isn't supposed to go because he's an academic review, but Bones is going to try to sneak him on board in a scene that you might have seen in another movie. But to illustrate it, I want to bring out some friends of mine. You know, they've worked for me about 2 years now, and they help me illustrate scenes that are really dumb and cliched that you see in a bunch of movies. Like, I haven't actually had to have them do the scene where the woman doesn't get on the plane at the end of the romantic comedy. But scenes like that, you know, that we all know, in this fresh new Star Trek, they decided to pull out one of these. So, to illustrate please put your hands together and welcome the inanimate players.
Uh-oh. Tube Guy, how are we gonna sneak me aboard? General Error standing guard.
Don't worry about him. I got the perfect plan. Come on. Oh yes, we're here to go into the top secret laboratory.
Exactly who are you?
I'm Captain Tube Guy, and this is my associate. He's the cake decorator.
I don't have any cake decorators on my list. I'll have to report this to the higher-ups.
Excuse me, sir, but if this ship leaves without his cake decorator, Admiral Flabberty is gonna not have any wishes for his birthday. Now, do you want to tell him that he doesn't get his 50th birthday wish because you were here flapping your jaw?
Alright, go ahead and go on through.
Thank you. Come on.
That was too close.
Yeah, you owe me one, you know it.
They live in a shoebox. Okay, so after this, Chekhov warns the entire ship that they have some sort of strange lightning storm near Vulcan. Kirk actually puts it together and realizes that that's Nero, the man who killed his father. This was established in the beginning scene that we haven't gotten to yet. Let me be positive for a second. I actually kind of like that Kirk happens to be the only person on board who knows everything important and puts it together, and that gives him crucial information. There's another scene that makes this clear, but it's otherwise completely not important. And Kirk is right. They eventually do make contact with Nero. Nero tells them to send the captain of their ship as a hostage. So now Spock is the captain, and Kirk is now made first officer. Then we get that sword fight I talked about before, but Nero uses his secret weapon, magical space ketchup. Okay, so they call it red matter, but it's magical space ketchup. He drills into the center of Vulcan and sends the red matter to the core, where it creates a singularity that consumes Vulcan. I won't even say if it's necessary to drill to the center of the planet, because whatever. Spock's mother is sadly one of the casualties. It's kind of strange that they had to give it a personal connection to Spock when billions of lives were snuffed out, especially because Spock's mother had, what, one scene before this? Two? Following this scene is a scene where Spock and Uhura meet in the elevator, and Spock, despite losing his entire race, basically, seems to be perfectly in emotional control, and Uhura, seeing this, is less in emotional control, and she wants him to say something and react, and the more that he doesn't, the worse that she feels and the less in control that she gets. And it's a very tender, great little moment, and it's my favorite scene of the entire movie. After that, Kirk and Spock argue about what they should next do. Kirk wants him to go back to Earth because he's like, Earth is clearly his next target, and Spock's like, we have to meet up with Starfleet, that's our orders. They argue, they fight, Spock nerve pinches him, and then Spock maroons Kirk on Delta Vega, this icy hellhole, because apparently there's no Vulcan word for brig. So Kirk wanders around Hoth for a little while until he's beset by a giant, unconvincing CGI monster that is immediately dispatched by a less convincing, even larger CGI monster. What Star Wars movie does this remind you of? I'll give you a hint. It's not one of the good ones. He gets chased into a cave until the monster backs off because someone waves a torch at it. As it turns out, it's Spock from the original timeline, as they refer to him, Spock Prime. It's a good thing he ran into exactly that cave, huh? Spock Prime gives him an exposition dump in the form of a mind meld. Apparently, there was a supernova that threatened to destroy the galaxy. Stop! Time out! Hang on. Hold the phone! The galaxy? A supernova that can destroy the galaxy? A supernova can destroy, a solar system very easily. In fact, it can disrupt life up to light years away. But our galaxy is not only a couple of light years wide. Okay, do you guys remember in the 40s, like really old science fiction where they clearly didn't know a lot about astronomy? Because, who did other than, nerds? So they'd be like, our planet, they'd have like the aliens come in, our planet is 250 million miles away. It's like, well, that would put it between Mars and Jupiter, so you're really not that far. Or like Fantastic Voyage, where it's like, we're going to shrink you by reducing the space between your molecules. And when they do that, they immediately turn that person into the world's fastest and heaviest supersonic bullet going directly to the center of the Earth, because they're only a few microns long, and they still have the mass of a regular person. Well, sometimes you see old fiction where they clearly don't know the difference between a solar system, a galaxy, and the universe. And, you know, you thought we would have got past some of it, but apparently not. In 2009, you can just say something like the supernova that will destroy the galaxy. With how light the science is as far as like the magical space catch-up, like I can't believe they just didn't say the supernova met up with a supernova, they got supernova gay married, and they turned into a super dupernova. Apparently, excuse me, there is an explanation in the comic book prequel that preceded this Star Trek movie, but you know what? That doesn't count, because I kept hearing people say I didn't have to know anything about Star Trek to enjoy this movie. And apparently you also didn't have to know anything about astronomy to write this movie. So Spock developed the space ketchup to consume the supernova in a singularity. Before he could get there, Romulus was sadly destroyed. He said this as, and I quote, "While I was en route, the unthinkable happened." Is it really that unthinkable when, you know, whatever. Nero attacked him, and they both were sent through the singularity back in time. Nero appeared first, and Spock came through some 20-something years later. Spock surrendered the ship with red matter, and Nero used it to destroy Vulcan. Kirk and Spock Prime go to some warp station on Hoth where Scotty and Deep Roy Goblin Guy are, and Scotty and Kirk get aboard the Enterprise with Spock's secret of transwarp beaming, which hasn't been invented yet in this timeline. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's just like Star Trek IV, where Scotty gives the guy from the past the secret of transparent aluminum. Don't get me wrong, I actually really like the explanation that they have in this movie, where they basically say everything that happened in the other Star Trek media still happened. We're not changing anything in that. We're not saying it didn't happen. This is an alternate timeline, a splinter dimension, or whatever. I like that. In fact, there's something interesting afoot here. Maybe it's not totally inexplicable that Kirk was led immediately to Spock Prime on a gigantic ice planet, or that a logical being would maroon a prisoner, presumably to die, despite nothing about that lining up with their character, or Pike making Kirk first officer even though he was under academic review for cheating at the Kobayashi Maru, which is another scene I liked. Maybe there's such a thing as temporal inertia. Characters in motion will stay in motion, and despite a major deflection when something comes in and changes history, they will find themselves on the Enterprise, even if it means people have to act out of character or make decisions they might not, until they are together as one crew. It's destiny. This could be thrilling, or possibly repulsive, as the notion of this crew is so important that billions of Vulcan lives were seen fit to be snuffed out so long as this exact crew came together. You'd hope it wasn't the conscious decision of a benevolent destinator or something. It might just be, look, this has got to happen. And whoops, a monkey wrench got thrown in. We have to get back on track and screw whatever gets upended and off the way. It has to be like this. This is all me, by the way. The movie doesn't get into any high concept ideas like that. Since when is Star Trek supposed to be about high concept science fiction? This is my primary objection to this movie, is the fact that it's supposed to be new, zesty, sexy Star Trek. Brand new, yeah! But then they go out and do the same stuff that Star Trek used to do, sometimes worse. Like, okay, in Star Trek IV, they're going to give the guy the secret of transparent aluminum. But they don't know if doing that is in line with what they believe is the invention of transparent aluminum and everything will be fine, or if doing that will cause the timeline to change, and then when they go back to the present, to their present, that it will all be different. Or if doing so will cause a paradox. You know, there's jeopardy there, because they need to go back to their future so they can stop the giant freaky whale ship thing, whatever it was called. But here, Spock's never going back to his timeline. He can tell Spock whatever the hell he wants, it does not matter. Speaking of which, maybe Spock wants to tell Romulus about that supernova, because supernovas happen when they happen. He only went back 150 years. It's not like that's going to change anything, because that's going to still happen, apparently. So maybe he wants to tell them so they can start, you know, evacuating, or preparing, or kissing their loved ones goodbye, or something. As it turns out, a non-canon source says that, hang on, where is it? The supernova might have been deliberately invoked by the, remnants. That might be the strange reason why it might destroy the entire galaxy. Aren't we glad that we don't need external sources like knowing stuff about Star Trek to enjoy this movie? Isn't it great? All this to get Kirk back on the Enterprise. But this leads to the big question. What is the big damn deal with Kirk? Why is he so special? Why is it so important to get him back to the ship? I don't think we learn what makes him so special. He beats the Kobayashi Maru, but we don't know how. We don't know why Pike thought he was so special, other than that he's the son of the guy who saved his life. Again, I'll get back to that. I've heard him compared to Tom Cruise in Top Gun, but it's not like Kirk is directly controlling the ship himself. He has people for that. He just sits there and tells people what to do. Does Kirk learn anything in his journey? Perhaps the value of friendship, maybe? Does he personally change? I don't think so. Everything he does is always right and correct, so why would he need to? No matter how boneheaded or reckless all his decisions really are. So what was Kirk's plan before he met Scotty in Spock Prime? He wanted to go to Earth to intercept Nero and get his butt kicked? So what they end up doing is that so he and Spock beam on the ship to find the red matter that he doesn't know is there, and the shuttle that he doesn't know the Spock can fly, so he can fly it around, get out of the ship, crash it into the Nero ship, and they get beamed out by a warp specialist that they have not met yet. Now you might be like, oh, Chekhov could probably beam them out. It's like, you know what, he failed to save Spock's mother, and she fell like 8 feet. All Kirk actually does is find Pike, get another really bogus fight scene with a guy who looks a lot like Nero, but no, wait, this time it is Nero, because he gloats about killing his father, despite the fact that his father killed himself. I'll get to it again. This seems to be the hallmark of the utterly boring villain, see The Amazing Spider-Man. But don't rush, because it sucks. It's a lot worse than this movie, I swear. Nero sucks. Nero is a terrible villain. Shinzon from Star Trek Nemesis was a better villain than him. And that was like 10 years before Tom Hardy became cool, when he was all like, behind me is a symbol of a person. Nero didn't have squat until he took the red matter from Spock Prime, which makes you wonder why Spock Prime didn't just kamikaze into Nero's ship in the first place and not award this genocidal goon apocalyptic firepower. I like to imagine Shinzon trying to start this anti-Federation revolution for the intervening 25 years and getting nowhere. Yes, I've stolen all the non-dairy creamer from the coffee shop. They'll drink their coffee black, or not at all. He actually says he planned his rebellion. You planned that Spock, who you have no reason to assume was also pulled into the wormhole, would show up with a weapon you clearly don't know about or understand? You're no better at making plans than Kirk is. Hell, even Spock Prime, in his infinite Vulcan wisdom, he has the idea to give the weapon of unimaginable power to this unstable lunatic. Perhaps Spock thought it was logical that someone who'd lost his entire family, culture, planet in a natural disaster would not turn around and use it as a weapon, use the technology to inflict the self-same genocide. All because, as my brother adequately put it, because FedEx was late. If you hear anyone describe this character as sympathetic, smack them until your smacker is red. This doesn't necessarily make him a bad villain. In fact, he could be a very effective one, but he's still a whiny, stupid goon. I really don't want to talk about actors here, because in general, everyone does a great job, and actors are people. You know, they have the most on the line. They're the people you see. Directors get to hide behind the camera wearing a fake beard and a raincoat. And Eric Bana's performance here is interestingly off-kilter. But I think for a villain that just wants to destroy everything, I think maybe that performance works against that. He's just got no menace. He's completely unthreatening. All of his power is in the technology that he stole. He's a weenie. So yeah, Kirk's plan works. So, you know, the black hole forms right around Nero's ship. He can't get out of it. He's getting pulled in, you know. And they're like, you know, we'll help you not get pulled into the black hole, you know. And he's like, I'd rather die in agony. I draw on my forehead with a crayon. It makes me mad. Ah! So they're like, alright, and they shoot a bunch of photon torpedoes and they kill him, and then he goes into the black hole. Now they're like, let's get out of here. But now all of a sudden, now they're trapped in the black hole. And they're like, uh-oh, and they're getting pulled in. And, you know, it seems, I'm no military strategist, but maybe they could just let him die in the black hole instead of wasting a bunch of photon torpedoes and, you know, risking all their lives. Can someone tell me what's so special about Kirk? Really? Can someone tell me, please? Is this the end of our heroes? Well, now it's time for that game show that's sweeping the nation. How loud is this chip? Today on the show, we have Doritos Locos Tacos, nacho cheese and crunchy taco flavor. They used to make just a regular taco flavor, and I was sort of bummed when they stopped making it. They have a bunch of other tacos, and I'm just like, it's not as good. Just taco, please. This is close. Was that the end of our heroes? Let's rewind. Let's go back to the first scenes that I skipped. The actual first scene is the space battle when Nero first appears. He makes the deal for the captain to come over the ship just like he did with Pike later on. And he asks him if the captain has seen Spock Prime. He hasn't, so he immediately stabs him, which reads out "terminated" on the screens of the ship. Why are they scanning his vitals? Why did he die the second he was stabbed? Did they scan anyone else's vitals throughout this movie? What was even the point of bringing him there? When they brought Pike aboard later, it's after they have the space catch-up, and he wants, what is it? Subspace frequencies of Starfleet's border protection grids, specifically the ones surrounding Earth. So you can destroy planets, but you can't get around a border patrol? Furthermore, isn't it nice that we're getting away from technobabble, the one thing that even Star Trek people don't like? So, Nero attacks the ship. The ship's called the Kelvin, by the way. I don't know what it is about, science fiction writers and them naming ships after things that are also in space. That'd be like naming a spaceship the Event Horizon. And no one could possibly be so stupid. So Kirk's father is now captain, and he crashes the ship into the Nero ship, and everyone else gets away. And while on the escape pod, freaky Avatar lady tells Kirk's mother, it's like, okay, I need you to push now. Excuse me, it's my job to shine. I will push when I am damn ready. Thank you. Now, why do we even bring up this scene? Because for a long time, I had forgotten this scene was even in the movie. I thought that the next scene was the first scene in the movie. And let's talk about this one. So, we're in Iowa, and a convertible pulls away with a little kid driving it. A branded ringtone plays. I won't say the brand. I'm not doing their work for them, but if you watch Trigger Happy TV, you've heard it. And the logo is right there on the dash, so. I don't want to get sidetracked, but apparently parts of this movie were shot in the Budweiser plant in Van Nuys, California. Now, like those big drums you see in the engine room, those are like beer stills or something. Now, it seems pretty cheap for a movie this expensive to go ahead and say, oh, those things, yeah, that couch, that's actually a monster, you know. But, on the other hand, I didn't notice. I was just like, oh, okay. When someone pointed it out, I was like, okay, it seems obvious now, but they got it past me, so I don't actually include that in my criticism of this movie. And yet, when Uhura is ordering, drinks in the bar scene at the beginning, there's only one real drink she says, and she orders 3 Bud Classics. I think, no, not Bud. I believe it's Budweiser. Let me check. What the hell is it in this thing? Budweiser. She says the whole name. Budweiser Classics. So yeah, product placement in science fiction. It's weird sometimes. Anyway, so the phone rings. The little kid's stepfather berates him over the phone because you live in my house and this is my car. If this is one scratch on that beep, the boy hangs up. You know what I'd like? I want to see a scene where someone says, you better not get one scratch on my car, and a whole bunch of stuff happens, and the car flies all around, and he comes back, and there's one scratch on the car. It's not in pieces like Cookie Monster ate it and they gotta push it back to Sesame Street. That's no longer funny. Oh, but I get ahead of myself. So the kid hangs up, and I swear to God this is true. He turns on the radio, and Sabotage starts playing. Now, I love the Beastie Boys. MCA, may you please rest in peace, Abba Shalom, and all that, but I don't think they're going to be played a whole lot in 250 years, do you? This is sort of like that scene in Nemesis where Data sings an archaic song sometime in the past. I forget when. I think it might have been the 30s or something. Yeah, we sure are new and different, aren't we, in this new, fresh, sexy, zesty new Star Trek? Yeah, we're so different. Captain, I know how much you love archaic music, and if this was a spoof movie, we'd play something that was on the radio right now. But I'm not going to do that, so who do the kids like nowadays? How about that there Roxanne? I've heard she's got the look. So a cop on a hoverbike starts chasing him. He swerves and crashes through a flimsy wire gate. Apparently they have hoverbikes now, but gate technology has not advanced anymore in 200 years. The boy is heading directly for a quarry, from all the corn mines in Iowa. He screams, "No!" before hopping out, just like Dave Ryder at the end of Space Mutiny. Go look up that clip. I can't use it. In fact, watch MSG3K. It's awesome. He skids the car so he can hop out. The car careens to the quarry, and he barely clings to the dirt and pulls himself up. The cop asks him to identify himself, and he says, "My name is James Tiberius Kirk." And now, a true story. I saw this in theaters when it first came out in 2009 with my brother. And after the scene, he leaned over to me and whispered, and I quote, "This movie's gonna have to try pretty f***ing hard to make up for that." Do you see why I started later in the movie? Like, what is the point of this scene? This is ridiculous. Is it to show that young Kirk is a reckless, thoughtless twerp? That he's able to pull himself up on ledges very easy? Oh, they love that trick. I didn't talk about this before, but they just, they just love doing that. Like, apparently J.J. Abrams just loves shoulder strength. Any filmmaker who thought this scene was a good idea, I wouldn't trust with a crayon because I'm too afraid to be in his nose by the end of the day. Oy. The third scene involves a young Spock getting harassed by other full-blooded Vulcan kids. Apparently they tried 35 times to make Spock emotional, and what worked was bringing up his human mother. My coworker once pointed out, you know, that's usually the first thing humans use to insult people, their mama. It's not a terrible scene, but it establishes that you can goad Spock into fits of rage. That's how Kirk becomes captain, by the way. It didn't seem important, but he emotionally compromises him by berating him. By the way, Vulcans are supposed to be 3 times as strong as regular humans, so when he beats up Kirk, he should have just broken him up into alphabets. It does lead to one scene after this, where Spock talks to his father about being unable to control his emotions. His father tells him, "Don't try to. I didn't marry your mother because of any logical reason. I did it because I loved her." Second favorite scene. Maybe the scenes where Kirk provokes Spock would have more resonance if it wasn't how almost half the people in this movie act to each other. Almost everyone who gets any kind of meaningful dialogue is a dick. Even the fight scene at the beginning starts with Uhura and Kirk trading jabs, which I actually don't mind in this context, and then Kirk arguing with the bald guy, and then they start fighting. And once you see this, you realize it's almost every significant exchange of dialogue. The Vulcan High Council slights Spock for being half human. Spock slights Kirk by saying, "You of all people should know a captain can't escape death," referring to his dead father. Uhura calls Kirk Captain with a razor's edge. Bones and Spock argue about how marooning Kirk will be hazardous to his health. Kirk pisses off the Orion girl he's trying to nail by saying something stupid. Bones argues with the flight attendant for no reason. When Pike tries to get Kirk to join Starfleet, Kirk says, "Are you done? Are you done?" I hate that line, because what that means is you as the writer couldn't write an end to that scene, and you had nothing left to convey to the audience, so you just cut it right off. Pike ends his interrogation with Nero by saying, "We have nothing left to discuss," which is the same goddamn thing! It's filler! It's like, "Get to the point," or "Come on!" It's lines you just hear in millions of movies. You sometimes hear it in decent movies, like Wreck-It Ralph. But it's almost as if in this movie, all the characters are paper thin and the dialogue so generic to the point where almost any line could be said by any character. This is supposed to be fresh new Star Trek, yeah, zazz, but we get the same old thing. People still grab their chairs, they still do this, they still shake the camera. I'm too far away from the camera to shake it right now. You just have to take my word for it. The cameras can shake, I assure you. And Spock's flying to the consoles, and people say lines like, "Divert power from that thing to that. Tell me something I don't know. We can't take another hit like that. I knew I should have killed you when I had the chance. Or this old chestnut.
This mission that we are about to go on is extremely dangerous. There's a likelihood that we will not come back from it. Double Batman. If we will not come back, Double Batman! It'll work. Trust me.
Remember we left off, Kirk thoughtlessly left them parked next to a black hole and they're going to die. How do they escape the black hole in this fresh, zesty, new, sexy Star Trek? Yeah. They ejected the warp core and detonate it. This sounded a little familiar? That's because they did it in Star Trek Insurrection. It wasn't even the climax of that movie. And they've ejected the warp core a couple times in Deep Space Nine. And Voyager like 6 times. They don't detonate it there. Obviously they can't get it back. Oh, and also they do something similar in Treasure Planet. They don't have a warp core, but they do something to ride a shockwave out when they do something when they're stuck in a black hole. And it's not even Kirk's idea. It's Scotty's idea. What does Kirk bring to this movie? Really, I'm serious. Someone might say, "Oh, don't be cynical, just enjoy it." As a great man once said, "There's more annoying cynicism online than there is porn." But I don't think I'm the one being cynical. This movie was born and bred on cynicism. The type of cynicism that makes you think you know everything, and that any old story is just as good as the Star Trek story, so long as they jettison everything about the franchise that you don't like or you don't understand. If they actually took Star Trek apart to its bones, figured out what worked, what didn't, what could change, what a modern perspective could bring, and they told a good story with good action and Roddenberry's surprisingly optimistic view of the future, that could be excellent. But now we've got a hyper-generic and cut-down version of the Terminator. I suppose you could say it happened with Transformers. Written by the same people, by the way. How is it the Transformer is this gigantic geek movie pariah, and this one gets a free pass? It even happened with James Bond. Skyfall is the least Bond-like James Bond movie since From Russia with Love. It's all so personal and small. The crucial difference is that Skyfall is good. I don't reject this movie because it's bad Star Trek. There's tons of bad Star Trek. It has plenty of company. But I reject it because it's bad filmmaking, it's bad storytelling, it's bad action, and it's bad science fiction. It's a bad time at the movies. And if you love it, great. I'm not going to take that away from you. You have it, it's yours, whatever. But I think we can still have a conversation about why I didn't like it and have that be civil, you know. We don't have to be all hostile. Say whatever you want in the comments, you know. If you disagree with me, if you think I'm wrong, if I got something wrong factually, definitely tell me. But let's just not be hostile about it, you know. There's got to be a way to have a conversation about this, about movies, definitely. We can't have a conversation about almost anything without someone being like, you know, getting all bent out of shape. It's like, yeah, but if someone might be like, well, you were shouting, it's like, I'm trying to make entertainment here. I hope you did find this entertaining, illuminating, educating, some other thing that begins with a vowel. I don't know. I'm almost out of batteries, so thank you all for watching. This is King Cool, and please drive home safe. I know Data doesn't do this. It's just easier to animate as if I'm C-3PO. How do you say rest in peace in Hebrew? Oh, how silly of me.
Fools! I mean, hello! I am Dr. Eyebaltron in widescreen. Look at all the space I got here. Yeah! Alright. But for those of you who don't know, I got this show called The Gripes of Wrath, where I tell you the things you need to know. Let's go! So I've been looking into mouthwashes, because I'm trying to impress the ladies, you know, more than I obviously do, and I found this one. It's fresh citrus, and it smells like orange pulp, and it also tastes just like triaminic. You know, that cough medicine you give to kids. Why would you make a mouthwash that you can't swallow tastes like something that you can swallow? What's your next flavor gonna be? Cotton candy? What's your problem? Ah!